and in 2000, they recognized the need for hiring an executive director, and I was the lucky person chosen. And so I've been with CCT now for 20 years. And at that point in time, I have a master's degree in social work, and I have experience in creating and moving forward nonprofit organizations and building programs. So it was just a wonderful match, and I've enjoyed my work really every day. That's why I'm still here. So over this time, we have grown and become not just a local to Richmond organization, but statewide and then beyond. So now we do have beneficiaries all over the country. And that sort of happened by happenstance. People heard about us, attorneys learned about us, and before long, word got out and people were calling from all over the country saying, can I set up a trust for my client with you? Or parents calling and saying, I've heard such good things about you. So we grew, and our model is very professional, I think, and we're very, very fortunate to have the board that we have and the staff. And you can see staffing, the people that actually administer the special needs trust are experienced, licensed clinical social worker, master's level social workers. And we're very fortunate to also have a trust and estate attorney on staff. So, and an amazing group of board members. So very, very astute and committed to the work that we do. And it's required that we have a certain number of people on the board, either with a disability or a family member who has a loved one with a disability. So we're really, I think, very well represented by the board and the staff. Benefits of a pooled special needs trust are the fees are affordable, and it's it's easy to navigate in terms of setting things up, and we'll get into that more later. So what are the responsibilities of a pooled trust administrator? It's a big job that we have, and decisions do not always come easily, but we're very, again, fortunate to have support and a lot of directions. And so one of our big jobs is to make disbursement decisions. And so with that, having said that, we look to the grantor, typically a family member who is setting up the trust, to give us their vision for the trust. And we know that can change over time, but we'll look to that for guidance, and then also gather a lot of information about the beneficiary. Again, some requests are easy in terms of, pay my cell phone bill, and others are more complicated and require a little bit more information with which to make the best decision. We also, of course, look to the person who is giving us information about the beneficiary or making the request, who we call the advocate, and for help in the decision-making process. But ultimately, it's the trust administrator that approves or not the request. So we manage and invest the funds and make sure the funds are used for the benefit of the beneficiary. We will report to the Social Security Administration and Medicaid information as requested for beneficiaries that get SSI and Medicaid. And for all of our clients, they have access to information electronically on our website, or certainly through the mail if they don't have access to information. We'll send out a K-1, which is a tax form. And while we're not accountants, we advise folks to speak with the tax preparer if they have any questions about what to do with the K-1. But that's by law. We have to send out a K-1 every year for folks that actually use the trust. And then whenever it's required, we'll provide court accountings and court qualifications. But that's rare. It's only when required. So what is a pooled special needs trust? What is the definition? And I just think of it as just one great big large sum of money. And that's what the word pooled means. So each individual is part of the pool. And so everyone has their own sub-account. The funds are pooled for investment purposes. And the advantages are a greater opportunity for growth. We hope. I never promise that because I don't have a crystal ball, but certainly lower fees because, again, the funds are pooled and it's not an individual account. Right now for CCT, we have about $75 million in funded trusts. And a lot of the trusts that are set up with us by family members are not yet funded because they're funded through their will or estate plan. And so they're just kind of sitting there waiting to be funded, but they're set up. So that's a little bit about that. We talked about who lets us know what the needs are of the beneficiary. And depending upon the nature of the disability, the advocate is that person who lets us know what the needs are. And that person can be the beneficiary, him or herself. Again, as long as they're capable of handling that role. And that, again, very often just depends upon the nature of the disability. Sibling or relative can be an advocate, a guardian, or power of attorney, a caseworker, or really anyone that's close to the beneficiary that's trusted and has the best interest of the beneficiary in mind. Some parents will say to me, I don't, at the time that I pass away, more than likely there aren't going to be any relatives that are available to be the advocate. What am I going to do? And so we just tell them not to worry, that we will find a case manager who can establish a relationship with the beneficiary and let us know what the needs are. And so that's, I think, a tremendous relief to families. They can certainly name folks on our documents, and that can change over time. So you can always update who the named advocate is as things change. But at some point in time, there may really not be a named advocate. And so that job falls to us. And it's a very, that the advocate, certainly plays a very important and trusted role. So let's just talk about benefits. And sometimes this is the reason a special needs trust is set up. It's because the individual beneficiary may receive means-tested public benefits, such as SSI or Medicaid. So that's not all the time, certainly, but some of the time, that's why a special needs trust is set up. The other reason is the beneficiary is not able to manage his or her funds on their own. And so for that reason, a special needs trust is set up. Commonwealth Community Trust, or CCT, as a nonprofit organization, serves only folks with special needs. So we have adopted the Social Security Administration definition of disability as a guideline. And so it's just a guideline on how a disability is defined. And it's really someone who, as an adult, is not able to consistently care for themselves or provide for themselves financially through employment or whatever. So that's one definition. And then for children, it's again kind of the age appropriate standard of, is this child functioning at an age appropriate level? And that's helpful as a guide for us. And then the other type of benefits that are not means tested, or it's medically related but is not means tested, is Medicare. And that's for people who have a disability and or are over 65 years old. And so that's not means tested. Now, means tested medical care, as far as our government is concerned, is Medicaid. And that is very strictly adhered to with very rigid rules on how a trust can operate. And so we are very, very careful to abide by those rules and not jeopardize someone's Medicaid eligibility. So Medicaid is, again, our government's health insurance program for people who are aged, blind, and disabled. And that is a federal program that's administered by the state. And each state has their own rules regarding Medicaid. So we have to pay attention to each state's Medicaid rules, and in addition to making their SSI benefits. So, because most folks are get both benefits, Medicaid and SSI. So, talking a little bit about SSI and folks who really haven't worked because they do not qualify for SSDI. So SSI, supplemental security income, is a monthly allowance, and right now it's $783 a month that an individual with a disability can receive for their SSI. It's, again, means tested, so essentially the individual cannot have more than $2,000 in the bank, and so that's very restricting. But fortunately, they can have a special needs trust, and so they can qualify for their SSI and have more than $2,000 in countable resources, and it really offers the opportunity for an enriched quality of life. Social Security disability insurance is our government's way of supporting people who have worked a certain number of quarters and qualify for SSDI. This is not a means-tested program. And it's interesting to me how we'll have a lot of clients with Medicare and SSDI or SSI and Medicaid, and sometimes a combination of all four. So I'm not exactly sure the criteria. I'm an expert on CCT, but not always an expert on qualifying for public benefits because those rules change all the time. So we thought it would be helpful to identify the types of trusts that are offered. And I think this hopefully will be very helpful information. And the way I distinguish between a third and a first party special needs trust is whose money is it? So in a third party trust, the grantor, the person who is setting up the trust, is the parent, a family member, such as a grandparent or any third party individual, really, for the third party trust. It's not restricted on as to who can be the grantor, which is very nice. And the funds are really, once the third party trust is set up, can come from anywhere. It typically comes from the grantor's estate plan or life insurance policy or whatever they're using to fund the trust. But there's no restrictions on who can write a check to be deposited into the third party special needs trust for the benefit of and the name of the beneficiary. The third party trust, which is very nice, is not subject to a Medicaid payback, and there's no age limit. So I've had a daughter set up a third party trust for her elderly parent because the daughter was in the Army, and if something happened to her, she wanted funds to go to her mother with a disability. And so that was, it's typically parent, grandparent, or sibling setting up the third party trust. But we certainly have had friends do it too for someone younger. But this was a little bit different. The first party trust, again, whose money is it? So in that case, it's the beneficiary's own money. And so who can set that up? There are defined rules on who can set up a first party trust. So that can be set up by a parent, grandparent, legal guardian, or a conservator or a conservator, guardian conservator, or sometimes a power of attorney, and the beneficiary, him or herself, can set up the first party trust, and that's important. The funds are the beneficiary's own funds, and typically for us it's a personal injury award, our workers' compensation award, a direct inheritance, so the family member did not set up a third party trust and the funds came directly to the beneficiary, or it's the beneficiary's own funds. I've had parents say, oh my gosh, we set up this fund for our son and it's his own money, but now he's not going to be eligible for SSI or Medicaid. And so we'll have to, in that case, set up a first party trust for those funds. Sometimes it's even a Social Security back payment. The first party trust is irrevocable, and that's important because once it's set up, the funds are in the special needs trust, and it's not, you're not able to just say, okay, I want to have my money and run to the bank with it. It's not going to happen. And it's also, this is a key variable, it is subject to Medicaid payback. Medicaid set up these rules that we follow. And the rule is that upon the death of the beneficiary, Medicaid is notified, and whatever expenses Medicaid has paid on behalf of the beneficiary are owed back to Medicaid from whatever funds are remaining in the beneficiary's trust account. So we are obligated to abide by that rule. And so that's one of the first things we do, is check with Medicaid upon the death of the beneficiary. And it's very important the family members or whoever the advocate is understand that this type of trust is subject to a Medicaid payback. And then in terms of the age limit, it just gets tricky for people who are 65 and older. So we always need to have a conversation about that. So we talked a little bit about, it's kind of limitless on how a trust can be funded. A third-party trust can be funded, and that's can be an inheritance, a life insurance policy. Very often that's the case. And parents can designate through an employer benefit the special needs trust for the benefit of. And then, as we talked about, funds can come really from any source. So other family members, we suggest to parents, if there are other family members that may want to gift money to their child, when they've set up a trust, they can certainly do that. There are no restrictions. So lots of times, this is kind of the big question: what can the trust be spent on? And that's really, this is just an overview, because things come up and we get called, and we're always available to chat and work with the advocate, whomever the advocate is, or advocates. It can be certainly more than one advocate, on what's needed, what will enrich the life of the beneficiary. And some of this is of course dependent upon how much money is in the trust. Some trusts are very well funded, and so there's more opportunity for using the trust in various ways, and some are really small. I mean, we can have trusts as small as $5,000, or for a trust that's very small, or $10,000. So in that situation, you want to be a little more judicious on how the funds are dispersed. But we certainly, and again, what are the goals? If the goals are immediate needs and that's it, we're going to just basically spend the trust quickly on immediate needs, and that happens with first-party trusts a lot, for smaller trusts. And then, or if the goals are, and I've had a parent say this to me, it's really interesting. My only goal for my child with the funds that I'm leaving are for my child to be able to travel. I want my child to be able to travel the world. And it was just so interesting to me. I've never heard anyone say that is my goal. So that was the parent's goal for the funds that she was leaving her child. And he loves to travel, and please enable him to do this. Now, again, you know, it's just interesting how all that plays out. And certainly when there's larger sums of money, there's more flexibility. When there's smaller sums of money, you know, and there seem to be more critical needs for basic living expenses, you know, we'll counsel on being, you know, careful with how the funds are spent and looking at that very, very carefully. So typically you can see the list here. It's pretty extensive and very common that we buy a car for the beneficiary, do home modifications when needed, pay for case management services or caregiving services, clothing, medication, medical devices. That's all. And then if it's a child, the vacation thing, and certainly it just seems to be universal, a trip to Disney. So when we get a trust for a child, and you know, we can just kind of say, okay, we know they're going to go to Disney probably. So, you know, again, we're also, you know, monitoring, you know, the dollars and talking with families about that. But it's it just seems to be universal amongst not just at CCT, but with all types, all special needs trusts, that trip to Disney. We always suggest pre-need burial and funeral expenses, because upon the death of the beneficiary, the trust is essentially frozen. And if these types of expenses are expected to be paid from the trust, you know, we suggest that it's done, you know, pretty quickly. It's just helpful to get it, check that off the list. So, you know, from our perspective, how are we looking at requests that come in? And we get requests for all types of things. So again, some of this is dependent upon the size of the trust, but typically we're looking at is if the request is prudent. Definitely whether it would jeopardize means tested public benefits such as SSI and Medicaid. And if the request is for the sole benefit of the beneficiary, because that's definitely one of the SSI and Medicaid rules. So for folks getting SSI and Medicaid, we're pretty careful to look at that. And for folks that don't get those benefits, we have more flexibility. So if the beneficiary says, I'd like to buy Christmas presents for my child, if they're not getting means tested benefits, we have way more flexibility with that than for folks who get SSI and Medicaid. Again, our government is pretty strict with adhering to the sole benefit rule. And then is the request consistent with the intent of the grantor? So we always like to take that into consideration. That's just how we tend to think about each request. So what do you need to do to set up a pooled special needs trust? For folks that are comfortable on the internet and comfortable going to our website, I've been told on numerous occasions that our website is very user-friendly. And so there's a lot of information, but it's easy to navigate. And so it's right, you know, clicking on the third-party special needs tab or the first-party special needs tab is where you would go, and you would see the process of joining. That includes the joiner agreement, the fee schedule. We are a nonprofit, but there are fees, and that is something that we want people to be aware of and understand. even as a nonprofit, we still have staff to pay and expenses that we have to cover as a nonprofit. There's also a family and beneficiary information document. It's, you know, it's optional, but we really appreciate when we get that information. And it's on the idea of a letter of intent, but it gives us a lot of good information about the beneficiary, and the grantor has an opportunity to share with us what their vision for the trust is. And again, all of this can be changed and updated over time. It's not written in stone, except for the joint agreement. So you know, you as a family member would need to think about what resources you have available for setting up the trust, and talk with an estate planning attorney. An elder law attorney is terrific because they really specialize in this area typically, but a trust and estate attorney is also excellent. And you would get guidance from your attorney on how, and they would facilitate writing the will or creating your estate plan. And then once that's done and you set up the special needs trust, you want to make sure that an attorney, I would imagine, would help with this, but making sure that all of the information is updated in terms of beneficiary designations on life insurance policy, employee benefits, whatever, the way that you want them. And then we always advise, and we would send out a note to families to, on an annual basis, just make sure that all the information is updated and correct. So that concludes my part of the presentation. I am open to questions and discussion. I know it's a lot to absorb, and I hope that it was helpful to you all. So I'm not sure if Nick is available to get us some questions or how that's going.
Yes, I am available. So does anybody have any questions? I guess we can start by just, if you would like to unmute yourselves and ask a question. If you could try to just, yes, I think Stephanie, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. My question is I'm a sibling, well, I'm a mother of a special needs child, but I'm a sibling of a special needs adult. And is it possible, because my family, my parents are not financially secure to set up a special needs trust, but I am on her behalf. Is it possible to do that without having her social security number?
Oh, sure, yes. And I'm happy to help you with that. If you have any questions, of course. Yes, you can. Yes, that's the good news.
Okay, great. And were there any other questions from the group?
I have one. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
If you already have a special needs trust set up, and I did that in 2009, but the lawyer who set it up actually reached out to me to find out if I knew if the law had changed. And thank you for so what would be a good way to keep up with that? So I'm actually not meeting, I have a lot of things in place, but I realized, as you described and he referenced, things change. So what is a good way to keep up with that?
I usually refer people to an attorney, but when an attorney calls you, I'm not sure what to say.
Are there, so there are people that, I mean, at some level I could call another attorney, but then it feels like a large expense to, I might not necessarily need to redo all that we did. Maybe I need to shift over. There's not a place that sort of keeps this information, or just, I don't know if Commonwealth Autism has a place of listing updated laws, or if that's part of your website, or.
No,
We do not.
Yeah, I don't, and that's a huge undertaking.
Yes, that's
Really.
something that would be way beyond our scope.
Yeah, and I would, so again, I don't know if your attorney, if this is their specialty, if elder law or trust and estates is their specialty.
It is not.
Yeah, so honestly, really and truly, that's probably what you, I hate to tell you to have to go out and spend money, but that's probably, to be safe, that's really what you want to do. And you can certainly call me and I can try to refer you to someone that I know has this expertise, because for one thing, even if we are named as the trustee, at that point, you don't have to update anything, because it's done through our master trust and our master trust agreement. And so we stay up on the changing rules.
Okay.
But when it's an individual trust, you want to have an attorney who is consistently working in that area and has done it correctly, or it may not meet what you had hoped it would.
Right.
So again, I'm happy to help you. You're more than welcome to call me. I can try to, find you an attorney, or work with you to find an attorney that has that expertise.
Right.
Or there's a website that you can go to. It's the Special Needs Alliance website, and they have a list of attorneys with this expertise.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna make a note of that as well, Joanne. Thank you. We'll try to get that into our resource database for families.
Right. And again, I'm happy to help too. I know a lot of attorneys.
Okay. Thank you. Did we have any other questions from the group? Oh, let's see. I think I might have some chats here. Let me go. Give me just a moment. Okay, Gary and Heather Mason were asking in the chat. Joanne, do you by chance have that website address? I know you said it was the Special Needs Alliance. Is that something they could search on Google?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. If they just put Special Needs Alliance,
Okay.
it'll come up. Or I think it's sna.org.
Okay. And you said that was sna.org, Joanne? I was typing some other things, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But Special Needs, spelling it all out, specialneedsalliance.org will get you right there.
Oh, gotcha. I will type it all in.
All of the above.
Got it. No, that's perfect.
And then you can just go to your state and see who I mean, they may just have a few attorneys named. May not be as, like if you're in Roanoke, it might not be an attorney, but I could think, I definitely know some good attorneys in Roanoke that can help. But, it's definitely a good group.
Perfect. Thank you.
I have a question, and this may be one of those things you can't answer, but we have 2 autistic children that are fairly functional. We're on the more functional end of the spectrum, but is there any guidance on what is a reasonable amount of money that we need to leave for each of them?
Right.
From age potentially 21 and on. How do we begin to know what the right amount is?
You might want to talk with a financial planner and just try to envision. I mean, if again, thinking about SSI at I don't know at what point your children will reach 21, but right now it's $783 for shelter expense. So what, shelter and food, by the way. And so what over that do you envision that they will need? And then you can start planning for that. Very often a life insurance policy. And sometimes the MetLife has a special needs trust section. And they may even have a calculator that can help you to work the numbers. And I would try that because that doesn't cost you anything. And 11, someone who is selling life insurance, there are some folks that really do specialize in working with families that have a child with special needs and helping them to plan for the future.
Thank you,
very
everyone.
much. It was my pleasure to be here, and I hope the information is helpful to you.
Yes, and thanks to Joanne for presenting, and thanks to Liz for helping, and thanks everybody for attending. I hope everybody has a great afternoon.